Office in March of last year commissioned the Parliamentary Budget Office to undertake research into the suburban rail loop and the budgetary implications of that, the debt that it will involve and the cost to Victorian taxpayers. The work of the Parliamentary Budget Office has been continuing, and the latest report from the Parliamentary Budget Office is most concerning. This latest report from the PBO tells us that the suburban rail loop will cost even more than we've been told previously that it will cost. We are being told by Victoria's independent Parliamentary Budget Office, an office Jacinta Allan's Labor government created, that there has been a further blowout of $16 billion in the first two stages of the suburban rail loop. $216 billion of Victorians and taxpayers' money which will go into one single project which doesn't have a proper business case, and what's more, will come at the expense of so many other urgent infrastructure projects around our state as parts of our state continue to grow at rapid rates with rapid population growth, infrastructure needs for more schools and hospitals. Jacinta Allan and her government are putting all of our eggs in one basket, sinking over $216 billion, and that's what we know to date, into this one single project, when Victorians right across our state need a government that will also take their needs into consideration as well. This was an independent report by the Parliamentary Budget Office that my office commissioned. It's part of a series of reports that the PBO has undertaken into this monster of a financial project. It will cost a bomb, and it will come at the expense of urgent projects right across our state. We're calling on Jacinta Allan and her Labor government to press the pause button on this project. We can't afford it, not when we have so many other urgent needs around our state. Jacinta Allan wants to put $216 billion into this one single project that doesn't have a business case. And yet, as I experienced the other day when I visited a local community in Donnybrook, you have to walk through a paddock to get to a local train station. They can't even build a footpath, yet they want to spend $215 billion on this project that doesn't have a proper business case. Again, we call on Jacinta Allan and her Labor government to pause this project. Stop it, we can't afford it. Let's look at all of the infrastructure needs around our state and have a whole of state vision. That's what my team will be offering and are offering as we look at the needs of our entire state. But the Allan Labor government continues to put all of our eggs in one basket. I'll hand over to Dave.
Thanks, JP. Well, this is a project that Victoria cannot afford. Jacinta Allan has maxed out the credit card, record debt, and we're all paying the price for her mismanagement. It is time to pause the suburban rail loop project. This should be a wake-up call to Labor that Victoria cannot afford to press on with the suburban rail loop going forward. We know that across the state there are so many people that are missing out on vital infrastructure projects. What this government is determined to do is to put all their eggs into one basket at the expense of many of our outer suburbs, regional Victoria, that have missed out for years on vital infrastructure projects. Jacinta Allan must take heed from the advice of the Public Budget Office, her own office which was created by Labor, in this report. This was a very simple report that just asked how much was this project going to cost. We asked the same question 12 months on, $16 billion further down the gurgler in terms of where we're at with this particular project. Year on year on year, all we're going to see from this project is costs continuing to blow out, and Victorians ultimately will all have to pay for this. We know that this is the largest infrastructure project in Victoria's history, and all the government has done is costings on the back of the envelope. You see the opposition that have released the PBO report to all of you today. What has the government done in releasing any of their costings? The government is silent. The government is lacking in transparency when it comes to releasing any information about the largest infrastructure project in Victoria. And I think we should all learn from this in terms of this is a government that is surrounding secrecy, that is about to sign Victorians up to massive debt. And if this isn't a wake-up call to Jacinta Allan, I don't know what is. We would plead with Jacinta Allan right now, don't sign Victorians up to record debt. We need to ensure that Victorians can survive through a cost of living crisis, and we know right now that we need to ensure that we have infrastructure right across the state. not just for one part of Melbourne, right across the strait. We don't have an airport rail, we don't have duplications of a lot of tracks that are needed in Melbourne's west, Melbourne's north. We saw a near miss on the Belgrave line only a few weeks ago because that doesn't have capacity and duplication upgrades. This is a government hell-bent on a pet project, the suburban rail loop, at the expense of every major infrastructure in this state, and Jacinta Allen needs to read the report and hit the pause button on the suburban rail loop.
Bridget to talk about the Breakthrough Victoria.
Well, good morning, everyone. Today we're talking about the Breakthrough Victoria issues. The state Labor government has serious questions to answer in relation to transparency and accountability when it comes to Breakthrough Victoria. With Breakthrough Victoria, we are seeing a massive breakdown because, of course, we're hearing so many negative stories. This is $2 billion fund. The Labor government took $2 billion of taxpayers' money to create a new fund which was meant to be for investment in start-up businesses, seed funding, to invest and grow the Victorian economy. But all we're seeing is problem after problem when it comes to the Breakthrough Victoria Fund. It's shrouded in secrecy, $2 billion of taxpayers' money shrouded in secrecy. Really, we've got to ask, what is the state Labor government doing about the integrity and transparency of Breakthrough Victoria? Only days ago we heard about a number of the board, the directors on the board, leaving Breakthrough Victoria without any explanation, and today we are hearing that one of its significant investments, one of Breakthrough Victoria's significant investments, $30 million of Victorian taxpayer money, into a business that is shedding jobs. Now, as I said, when the state Labor government announced Breakthrough Victoria, they announced that they would be investing in businesses to contribute to the Victorian economy and that they would create a pipeline of 15,700 jobs. But with today's news, all we're seeing is jobs being cut, jobs being slashed by businesses that this Victorian Labor government has invested in. So there are significant questions to answer as to why this is happening. Time and time again, this Labor government is demonstrating it has no ability to do due diligence with investments that it's making on behalf of Victorian taxpayers. This is taxpayers' money. We're in a cost of living crisis and the government just took $2 billion, put it into a fund that is completely secretive, and has lax transparency, is investing in businesses. We don't understand what deals they've done with this business. The Deputy Premier, Ben Carroll, was involved when the investment was made in SEER, $30 million of Victorian taxpayers' money, and now SEER is slashing jobs. This was a fund, there's no transparency, completely secretive. This was a fund that was meant to invest in businesses to grow jobs, and all we're seeing is job cuts. So we've got serious questions that we're asking today, and Jacinta Allen and Ben Carroll need to come clean about what deals they've done with these businesses, how that they can ensure that these investments are actually delivering a return, because we're not seeing that. We aren't seeing any return for Victorian taxpayers. And what other deals have they done with these businesses? How can we know that in a cost of living crisis, this $2 billion of Victorian taxpayers' money is being spent wisely? Because we think that it could be spent much more transparently and much better for the Victorian taxpayer. So as a result of these serious concerns with Breakthrough Victoria and this $2 billion of Victorian taxpayers' money that's just sort of locked away, the government is failing to answer any questions on this fund. We will be calling on the Auditor-General to take a look at this, because whilst the Allen Labor government is failing to answer questions on Breakthrough Victoria, we think we need to dig a little more deeply. So we'll be calling on the Auditor-General and asking them to investigate Breakthrough Victoria, which seems to be at breakdown stage at this point in time. It's chaired by a Labor mate in John Brumby, and quite frankly, I think taxpayers deserve a little bit more information about how this money is being spent. So we'll be calling on the Auditor-General to make some inquiries into Breakthrough Victoria. Thank you.
Bridget, any questions?
Just on the PBO report, do you support the use of public-private partnerships to fund the suburban railway? Because the PBO, in the analysis that you've requested, have said that if there is PPPs, it would more closely align the project's costs two benefits?
Well, of course we see PPPs as a useful vehicle for infrastructure projects, but where is the government on all of this? The Allen Labor government seems to speculate openly about different funding models it may employ for the funding of this project, and we're still to learn whether the federal government is going to contribute more than the $2 billion it already has contributed. Danny Pearson, in this parliament only days ago, in answer to a very basic question about whether the SRL is fully funded, could only say that it would be funded a third from the state, a third from the Commonwealth and a third from value capture. Well, we know value capture may fall well short of that and will only involve taxes on local residents within a 2 kilometre radius of the railway stations involved. But we don't know yet whether the Commonwealth is going to support this dud project. And I think the Commonwealth government, like so many of us, are looking at this project and think there's no proper business case for this. We're not going to chip in more Commonwealth money until there's a proper business case. And I think they'll arrive at the same conclusion that most other Victorians have arrived at, which is our state has a diverse range of urgent infrastructure needs. This one project will foreclose all of those. There'll be no money for other urgent projects around the state if we're committed to this with generations of debt that we'll experience now and well into the future.
So just to be clear, you accept the analysis of the PDO that PPPs could actually align the costs, no matter how big they are, to the benefits of the project?
Yeah, but I think what you'll find, Simon, is that the benefits have never really been articulated. And one of the common concerns that people express, including us, is that we've got no information on what kind of patronage would be required to satisfy a cost-benefit analysis, and also whether alternative forms of transport. Experts we've spoken to talk about light rail, improved bus services, smart buses being used in the process. So the analysis has never looked at all of these things. The analysis has simply been a self-serving exercise in supporting what Jacinta Allen and Daniel Andrews wanted, which was a back-of-the-envelope project that they could take to 2 elections. Well, they might have got through those 2 elections, but we're no wiser today on what the project will actually cost on their analysis.
PBO, the government's probably arguing the PBO is being asked to cost operational costs as well, and that's inflating the figure. What's your response to that?
It makes no sense for the Allen Labor government to contest the analysis. What good is it to build a railway line that you can't use and operate? Of course you have to take operational costs into account. To simply focus on the capital costs ignores the obvious consequence that you have to operate it. It's further evidence, this concern by the Allen Labor government that we shouldn't consider the operational costs is further proof they don't understand the project they're building. You can't just build it and leave it alone. You've got to build it and then operate it. You have to take all of these costs into account.
Is that how you would cost things going forward?
Absolutely. You've got to give the Victorian people a clear indication of what things will cost, not only to build, but to operate as well.
What's the Coalition's policy currently on SRL? Do you still have the viewpoint that the money should be diverted into health projects, or specifically, you keep saying in recent weeks that you don't want to put eggs in what basket? What basket are you putting in?
Yeah, no, Simon, there's a few layers to this, so let me just run through them quickly. Our approach to infrastructure, we've got to take the politics out of it, which is what Jacinta Allen's Labor government has done. So we've talked about auditing of high-value, high-risk projects. We've talked about establishing regular and ongoing parliamentary oversight of the way projects not only are configured, but are overseen during their life, from construction through to operation. So parliamentary oversight's a big part of what we talk about, which will then, in taking the politics out of it, enable a very sensible look at all of the state's infrastructure needs. And our concern with the suburban rail loop is that they're proceeding full speed at the expense of all of that. Now, when it comes to what we want Jacinta Allen to do on the suburban rail loop, what we want Jacinta Allen to do is stop it. It's already $216 billion on the analysis of the PBO today. Remember also that late last year, Victoria's Auditor General, on the basis of the government's own figures, pointed to the possibility that Stage 1, SRL East, could have blown out by as much as 20%, which is around $7 billion. So we've got not only one, but 2 pieces of analysis which are telling all of us that the SRL is already blowing out before they've even started it.
Well, what's your policy though? Like,
Okay.
Is it still to redirect the money as the coalition took to the election into health projects, or has that changed?
Not just health. It could be health, but it could be everything. Because what we're saying, and what David was saying a moment ago, as well as myself, is that we've got urgent needs around our state, whether it's roads, hospitals, schools. You've heard me talk about those things in recent months. There's a wide catalogue and a long catalogue of projects that will be ignored if all of our eggs are put in the one basket. So we're not just saying just for health, it's for everything. Schools, hospitals, roads, other urgent infrastructure that our state needs. What we want Jacinta Allen to do is just be responsible. Don't sign us up to a mortgage that we can't afford. They're trying to buy a house that's well out of our league to buy. $216 billion on current numbers. And every new set of numbers points to further blowouts. This has to be stopped. Now, if Jacinta Allen continues with the project and to sign contracts, then that will commit generations of Victorians to mountains of debt. Now, what we've said is we've asked the government to tell us whether the SRL project is fully funded. It concerns me greatly that Danny Pearson said in this parliament only weeks ago that all contracts for the SRL will be signed before 2026. Now think that through for a moment. That means that on the Auditor General's own figures, they could well have signed us up to more than $40 billion worth of contracts. Is that responsible? In anyone's world, is signing us up to over $40 billion of contracts responsible? I think most Victorians would agree with me that that is reckless. It is irresponsible and it ignores the urgent needs of our entire state.
Is it too late to be stopped at this point factually, and the other parties politically? Do you think they're really going to stop it when they've already cancelled the Commonwealth Games?
That, if the Allen Labor government doesn't want to stop it simply because it doesn't want further humiliation because of the Commonwealth Games fiasco, which Jacinta Allen overseeing, then that would be putting base politics before the interests of the Victorian people. The question we want answered is, we want the government to indicate whether it's willing to put the public interest first. It's not too late for the Allen Labor government to cauterise the damage that's been done. Now, we know from the financial report issued last Friday that the government has signed about $3.9 billion worth of contracts so far. Now, we don't know what's in those contracts. We have called for Jacinta Allen to release those contracts. She refuses to do so. She should do so. But it's not too late to prevent Victoria from sinking into a massive debt hole that it will be impossible almost to get out of. Not only the current generation, but future generations of Victorians will be saddled with the responsibility of trying to meet those debt figures and pay the price for what that means in terms of cuts to services, higher taxes. That's not a future the Victorian people deserve.
The PBO analysis has the cost to build SRL East at $32.8 billion, which is within the forecast range from the government. Is it a positive at least that that figure has withstood independent scrutiny?
Well, you've got to look at the overall costs. And whilst that figure for now is at $32 billion, our concern is, like the Auditor General's report, the figure continues to grow. And now we're at $16 billion. That's the overall figure we're concerned about. We've also got the Auditor General's figures, which point to a 20% potential increase in cost blowouts. So it's a concern for us. David, I'm not sure if you want to comment on this as well, but it's the overall cost.
I think the importance here is that if the government think that these figures are wrong, then they should release the figures that they're relying on. And we've seen nothing in terms of the detail that is signing Victorians up to infrastructure that we've never seen in a lifetime. It is really important to just remember that no one has backed this project, whether it be the Auditor General, whether it be the Grattan Institute, the Ombudsman, Rail Futures. Nobody has said that this is a project that is going to return a net positive to the state. And when it comes to infrastructure, it is particularly worth noting that Infrastructure Victoria, set up by the then Andrews government, was there to give independent advice on how we would spend on infrastructure going forward. And that's what we would do. We should be listening to Infrastructure Victoria. They've got a plan that builds out infrastructure over the next 20, 30 years that says that $100 billion would build health, would build schools, would build roads, transport, and would help with energy. That is half the total cost of the suburban rail loop. Here is a government that sets up an agency, ignores their advice, and then off the back of an envelope comes up with a project that just keeps going up and up and up with no detail, no substance, and ultimately Victorians end up having to pay for their mismanagement.
But how do you explain that the nominal bill to figure is still inside the envelope that the government outlined?
Yeah, and again, what we've got is a VAGO report which has indicated particularly suburban rail loop could go up within a 20% figure from the initial costs. So I think the issue that we've got at the moment is we costed out the overall project 12 months ago, and 12 months on, there is a $16 billion increase, almost 10%. So what does that mean year upon year upon year? And what we would be saying to the government, this is so much money that they're signing Victorian taxpayers up to. I think it's only fair that they should release the details, release their costings, show us on what basis we're actually signing Victorians up to this. And if Jacinda Allen doesn't know, she should pause this project. We are in an absolute a debt situation, a cost of living crisis that no one has seen before. Do you think it's fair at the moment for Jacinda Allen to sign Victorians up to more debt, more costs, more blowouts? And we've heard Jacinda Allen in the Parliament say projects cost what they cost, having no regard for financial management. Well, I think people do care what they cost, and ultimately Victorians are really struggling at the moment and don't want to see taxpayers' money wasted on these kinds of projects.
In terms of those running costs, I know the ongoing costs, operating costs over the years, and not a substantial amount, say the asset renewal, that sort of thing. What about factoring in rail staff and drivers? Did you ask PBO to calculate that?
Yeah, so that's part of the overall. So it's asset, that's operational, and that's obviously the build as well. So, and again, that's what we did initially on the initial project. So I think, again, as John pointed out, it is really important. You're not just building a rail without using it. So we need to understand what the overall cost is going to be to taxpayers, and that's ultimately where we need to drive these kinds of things. The PBO is a great independent agency that's there for that very reason. I think it's quite interesting that the government would go and criticise an agency that they set up. We should be using more of these agencies. I think Victorian taxpayers expect more transparency from government. For Lily D'Ambrosio to call it a dodgy agency, dodgy work, I think the only dodginess that we're seeing right now is a dodgy government lacking in transparency and ultimately is not preparing to deliver the information that Victorians need.
Did you ask them to factor in driver costs, driver training?
All we did was to say how much was it going to cost to establish and run the suburban rail loop, and that's effectively what they've come back with.
Do you know if they included that?
Well, I would envisage that's part of the overall operational cost, so that would be part of figuring.
What about fair revenue? Did you ask?
So there is a revenue and expense that factors into all of that, so that revenue would be part of that as well. But again, that's only on a number of assumptions that they can make going forward. The government's got the levers here. It's the government's project. We need to understand how much this project is going to cost, what revenue is factored in, whether there are private-public partnerships. And as John said, we need to also remember the federal government's walked away from this. They're given $2 billion on $11 billion commitment. Where's the other $9 billion? So we don't even have the money to activate stage one of this. Value capture is questionable. Every major independent agencies has looked at that saying we won't reach value capture. So this is a project that is not funded. You would never build a house unless you've got the loan ready to go before you lay a brick. This is completely not what this government's doing at the moment. They're signing Victorians up to a whole lot of uncertainty. But one thing that we are certain about is continued blowouts by this government and continued debt that we all have to pay for.
The government will obviously argue that the Victorians voted for this twice and they've got a mandate to deliver this, and that stopping the project will basically cost us more to deliver it. What's your response?
Yeah, so when Jacinda Allen went forward with this project, it was going to cost $50 billion. So Victorians, for the whole thing, $50 billion for the whole project. So to now come out and say, well, you know what, you voted for something that was $50 billion, that's now $216 billion, where does it stop? This clearly shows that this was a back-of-a-napkin idea that was dreamt up to win a few seats without any detail, without any substance. And I think, quite frankly, it would show great leadership of this government to turn around and say, we're not in a position to proceed right now. We need to hit the pause button for the benefit of the state. This government is ignoring Victorians. It's ignoring what everybody is telling them. And, it's actually okay to be able to say you got it wrong and then change your mind. I think that's what a lot of taxpayers would actually rate right now, particularly in a cost of living crisis.
Yeah. Just want to add my comments to David's and echo what David said. No government can seek a mandate when the mandate it sought was based on a fraud. The Allen Labor government told the Victorian people that the SRL would cost $50 billion. We're now seeing with each new report the cost continues to blow out. Well, we now know it will cost at least $216 billion. If the government says it's got a mandate on this project, let's remember, it lied about the costs. It lied about the cost-benefit analysis. It lied about the business case. The sensible and responsible thing for the Allen Labor government is to stop this project urgently. Let's look, involving all of the agencies of government, stakeholders, communities, at how we prioritise urgent projects around our state. That's the sensible, responsible approach we need in this state. And to proceed stubbornly, hell-bent on a project that just doesn't stack up, but will rack up the debt, is highly irresponsible. It's not prudent. In fact, it's reckless, and it will put Victoria's future at risk.
If they dispute these VBA numbers, would you challenge them to redo that business case?
We would absolutely call on them to produce whatever we would call on them to produce whatever materials they are relying upon to contest these figures, and also the Auditor General's figures. I invite Jacinta Allen to do that. Be upfront with the Victorian people. In terms of the opposition, we think there should be parliamentary oversight. That's our policy. We think there should be ongoing auditing and real-time supervision of these major projects, particularly when they're as big as this. The Allen Labor government refuses to allow any transparency, and that's a problem.
It's not another matter. You had two MPs in the upper house last week abstaining from the party's position on different bills, one on work cover with McGowan, the other one on energy targets. Do you lead a united opposition?
Yeah, we took positions on those issues. They're very clear. We're providing an alternative to the Allen Labor government, holding it to account, but outlining a vision for the future of our state as we've been discussing today.
So you lead a united opposition where everyone in the same party?
Yeah, look, in any party, there's a diversity of views. In the Labor Party, they don't allow much for that, but in our party, we have robust debates and they're always very constructive. We move forward, and we're holding the Allen Labor government account today for breakdowns, whether it's in the proper management of major projects when it comes to suburban rail loop, but as Bridget was saying, Breakthrough Victoria, where we've seen a $2 billion fund so far boast only misspent $30 million, which we're going to ask the Auditor General to look at. They're the issues Victorians care about. They don't care about any other issues internal to the Labor Party, the Greens or the Liberal Party. They're focused on the future of our state, as we are.
They care about work cover and wind targets, so not to dismiss the question, why weren't your two MPs on board with the party?
They're matters I'd refer you to them to answer. What I would say about what we did on work cover was we pushed the government to accept the need for an independent inquiry late last year. That was a very productive and constructive exercise. We ended up with a better bill, even though we don't think Danny Pearson should be in charge of work cover as the minister, and we need a new minister to try and fix up his mess. The changes we secured will involve a premium freeze for employers, but it will also involve benefits for workers in terms of a better return to work scheme as well, which we all know, based on all of the data, that getting workers back when it's safe to do so into workplaces so they can be with their colleagues is better for their recovery and better for their long-term experience as employees.
Did they tip you off beforehand that they were going to abstain from those votes?
Yes.
Paramedic industry.
Personally, or just the upper house leadership?
They made the appropriate communications.
To you?
I'm satisfied that those procedures were.
So they didn't tell you?
No, I'm not going to go into those matters.
A paramedic industrial action begins on Monday. Should the government let it get to this point?
Here's another example of breakdowns in the Allen Labor government. We see a conga line of workforces enter effectively industrial war with the Allen Labor government. It's been police, it's been V-line drivers, it's been public servants, you name it. Now it's paramedics. We rely on our paramedics to do a great job to keep us all safe, and the Allen Labor government should sit down with them. The Premier herself should sit down and make sure, at a time when, in addition to our cost of living crisis, we have a health crisis and a crisis affecting ambulance response times. We know that from recent data that's been published. Jacinta Allen, if she understands the urgency of that, and how much we as Victorians all rely on our ambulance paramedics, then she should sit down with them, show them respect and sort out this industrial war. No, but the Premier can sit down with our paramedics. She can sit down with the paramedics, show them the respect they deserve and sort the industrial dispute out.
Should they go over the wage cut?
I know from experience, governments can work constructively with their employees and their representatives to reach win-win situations. But you'll only get to that point if, as a Premier, you show the leadership to sit down with them. And if you don't do that, all that happens is the industrial dispute becomes more protracted.